Good day, dear students. In current lecture, we should actually discuss viral enteric pathogens, but we have two main groups of viruses here. It is enterovirus and viruses causing hepatitis. So hepatitis will be discussed in a separate lecture because we have oral and parenteral hepatitis. They have very similar clinical presentations and pathogenesis. So they should be discussed together to give you correct info about differential diagnosis. And in current lecture, we have only enteroviruses as pathogens transmitted through fecal-oral way. So enterovirus, it is a genus of viruses belong to family of Picornaviridae, and pico means very small, RNA because RNA containing virus and viridae is a virus. So picorna viridae, it is the family of small in size viruses containing RNA genome. So enteroviruses are one of the most smallest viruses in size. They can be so small as 22 nanometers in diameter, and they have one of the most primitive genetic structure, only less than 10,000 nucleotides. So we have very difficult and confusing classification of enterovirus, and actually different books, if they were written in different time periods, they can have different classification of that viruses, and sometimes you became confused. So in some books, the viruses can be described as one species with multiple serotypes. In some, they're divided into 5 species, and some they're divided into groups. So actually, you should know that enterovirus nowadays is one genus which contains multiple species, and actually you should know 3 main groups of enteroviruses. First group, it is a polioviruses, or viruses which are responsible for poliomyelitis, Coxsackie group and ECO group. So viruses have absolutely similar structure, and only clinical presentations are slightly different, although even here they have some cross symptoms and diagnosis can be different. So all viruses are named enteroviruses because they are absorbed in intestinal tract initially, and they are transmitted through fecal-oral route, or gave the name for those viruses. So if you talk about structure of virus, it is unique. Virus have 4 viral proteins which are abbreviated as VP, VP1 to VP4. 3 viral proteins are located on the surface of the virus. 4th one is located within a capsid, and viral protein 1 is the main protein which is used in diagnosis of diseases, and it is the main target for neutralizing antibodies in the host organism, in human or animal organisms. So we have that VPG abbreviation. It is genome-linked viral protein. It is a unique molecule of protein which is combined or attached to genetic material of the virus, and it is required and it is important in RNA synthesis in the host body. So 3 proteins are always combined in a unique manner, and a number of those trimers make pentamer. 3 proteins make a protamer, and several protamers make a pentamer, which is a unique type of symmetry for that viruses, and viruses can be easily identified by studying of their structure. So poliomyelitis is one of the most studied diseases and one of the most known diseases. Actually, it is an infectious disease observed mainly in kids above 5 years of age with serious neurological disorders or consequences. So some description of disease which resembles poliomyelitis, and we believe that it is really poliomyelitis, were identified even in ancient Egyptian paintings, and the disease is one of the oldest known nowadays. So for infection, virus require unique primate-specific membrane receptor, what means that actually animals or primate animals can be ill with poliomyelitis as well as infection caused by poliovirus, not only human infection. So nowadays, poliomyelitis virus is the only species with 3 different serotypes. But again, in some cases, in some books, they can be described as 3 different species, or 3 different serotypes of enterovirus. So nowadays it is more correct to separate poliovirus as a separate species with 3 different serotypes. So virus can be transmitted by fecal-oral route, but as well it can be transmitted by respiratory way, or it can establish infection in oropharynx and intestine. Local episode of infection initially occurred in mucous epithelium of mouth or intestinal tract. So if you talk about diagnosis of waves of transmission, then virus can be easily identified in stool or throughout mucus before onset of disease. It means that people became infectious before clinical presentations, and it is especially dangerous because people will not know that they're ill, and of course they will attend the same collectives, the same school or class, and they are already infectious. And that's why polio very often occurred previous years. It occurred as massive epidemics in its collectives. So and nowadays we have very significant decrease of polio cases due to vaccination, and actually poliomyelitis can be lethal, and it is a not rare complication of disease when kids are dying. And due to according to different data, due to vaccination, it is more than 16 million people saved from paralysis or from lethal outcomes. So disease can be transmitted from human, but in the case of polio, we have carriage in tissues of intestine, and it is possible to have carriers of poliomyelitis. So disease can be transmitted person to person through saliva, through shedding toys or playing games, or through fecal-oral and alimentary ways. So as we said, virus should enter human or host body through epithelium of oral cavity or intestine, and primary multiplication occurs in regional lymph nodes, in tonsils, or in paired patches of small intestine. And after that, virus will enter the body and cause systemic infections. So number of infections became asymptomatic or have subclinical duration, means that no specific for poliovirus symptoms will be observed, and of course those people will not be paid with attention, required attention, and they can spread infection in communities. So initially disease will manifest with non-specific symptoms such as fever, fatigue, some vomiting, and rare, in some cases it can be stiffness of neck, and some clever educated doctor should think about some meningitis or other neurological disorder in that stage. But mainly those symptoms will be missed by even doctors because they are very slight and other symptoms of meningitis are not present. So viruses have unique cytopathic properties. It can cause degeneration of neural tissue, which will lead to damage of cells in anterior horn of spinal cord, and it will lead in general to limb paralysis. If virus will spread to posterior horn and motor neurons of thalamus, then even central nervous system can be damaged, which will lead to atrophy of muscles of human body and lead to flaccid paralysis. So if brainstem of affected person will be involved in that disease, then bulbar form of polio will occur, and that form can be fatal because of heart failure or respiratory failure. So as we partially said already, polio is classified into 3 clinical forms, which are known as mild illness or abortive poliomyelitis, non-paralytic polio or aseptic meningitis, and paralytic polio. And paralytic polio can be divided in 3 additional forms: spinal polio, bulbar polio, or mixed polio, bulbar spinal polio. So, of course, first 2 forms of poliomyelitis are favorable in outcome, and usually kids will recover without any further consequences. The most dangerous type of poliomyelitis is paralytic, when serious lifelong consequences will be observed in those kids. So disease will lead to irreversible paralysis of extremity, one or few extremities, with deterioration of joints, deformation of skeletal muscles and even bones. And if disease will occur in young age, then some severe handicaps can be observed in those kids. They cannot perform daily functions, and of course, they will remain disabled for the rest of the days. So, in some cases, usually not more than 10% of cases, little outcomes can be observed because of involvement of respiratory muscles, especially diaphragm. And to perform diagnosis, we need, of course, to take stool specimens, throat swab, in the case of systemic infection of blood. And if you can see on some neurological disorders, then CSF should be taken. And we have ELISA, immunofluorescence, and PCR as the main techniques. But again, nowadays, disease is not so prevalent, and usually laboratories will use PCR technique to identify the disorder. So we don't have any specific treatment, not to prevent, not to control, not to treat disease. And a few photos of severe polio when extremities are affected. Different extremities can be mono or bilateral, and usually those extremities remain in the stage of development when kid was affected. The extremity will not grow, it will remain the same size, muscles will not grow, and usually those extremities are used only to step on it or to use it. As you can see in those pictures, people can walk as a monkeys because actually legs are not working properly. And if arms are damaged, then usually those kids will use legs to perform any activity, and they can paint, eat with the legs, and perform every activity only with the legs because arms are absolutely not working. Of course, those people will have specific appearance. Other healthy kids will not play with them. They cannot attend common school. They cannot have common professions, and it is extremely difficult. And that disorder is significant for parents and for government of different countries as well. So the only thing we can do with polio is prevention. And we have multiple options to control the disease, to prevent the disease. We have two main types of vaccines: oral vaccines or oral polio vaccines, always known as OPV, and injectable vaccines or inactivated vaccines, which are known as IPV. So oral vaccine, it is a mixture of a live virus, and those vaccines available in trivalent, bivalent, or monovalent modifications containing 3, 2, or 1 serotype correspondingly. And actually, vaccines are much better in immune response than injectable and activated, because first, they contain a live virus, and immune response is significantly greater than in the case of an activated vaccine. Second benefit of that vaccine, it is given orally through natural way of viral invasion, and after administration of oral vaccine, both systemic and local immunity will appear. So tissue immunity in GIT will appear, and systemic immunity in blood and other organs will appear. But the main disadvantage of that vaccine, it is vaccine-associated paralytic polio, which is known as VAPP, when kids after vaccination have reactivation of virus in their body and they have paralytic disorders because of the vaccine. So because of that reason, oral vaccine is prohibited in some countries, and use of that vaccine is limited nowadays. So second type of vaccine is IPV, inactivated polio vaccine or injectable polio vaccine. It contains killed virus. Of course, that vaccine is much more safe. Usually all 3 serotypes are included in that vaccine. And vaccine is more safe, but it is less active as well, because vaccine is provided as an injection, and in intestine immunity is not present. So kids who are vaccinated with injectable and inactivated vaccine, they still can have local disorders caused by poliovirus. They can have intestinal disorders, and they can act as a carriage of the disease. So they cannot have systemic infection, and they will not have paralytic disorders. But GIT infection caused by poliovirus is still possible, and they can spread the disease to not vaccinated people. So according to CDC, and again that recommendation is applied for main number of European countries, only IPV is approved and oral vaccine is prohibited because of the paralytic disorder. So injectable vaccine is recommended in 3 doses in 2, 4, and 6 months, with the booster dose for dose in 4 to 6 years. And that vaccine providing good systemic immunity, but again, local infections by poliovirus are still possible. That's why in other countries, in Russia included and in India included, we have both vaccines used in vaccination schedule. And actually, when WHO started in activity against prevention of polio, India joined that activity very soon, in less than 10 years. And number of vaccines were introduced in the calendar of vaccination and schedule of vaccination, and still India is using those vaccines for prevention of polio in kids. So vaccination schedule similar to recommended by CDC. We have oral first or OPV0 dose immediately after the birth. Usually it is done within the first 2 weeks after the birth. Then 3 doses OPV 1, 2, 3 at 6, 10, and 14 weeks. The same is recommended by CDC, and OPV booster in 2 years of age. And actually, that thing is still not really clear for me. IPV vaccine injectable is provided in 4, and 6, and 14 weeks, but in some regions, in some areas of India, in some states of India, it is given as one single dose in 14 weeks. So what is not really clear for me, the main idea to use 2 vaccines, IPV and OPV, is to prevent vaccine-associated polio. So actually, in correct way, first dose should be provided with IPV, and kids will have systemic immunity against polio. When you will give an injection, kids will have systemic immune response, and paralytic polio is not possible. After that, you can give oral vaccine. It will provide local immunity and will stimulate systemic immunity. But as far as antibodies are already present, virus will not cause paralytic polio. So the only reason to combine 2 vaccines is to give IPV first to prevent paralytic polio, then to give OPV. But in your country still, first doses are provided with OPV, and only after first 1 or 2 or even 3 doses of oral vaccine, doctors give an injection of IPV. But what's the point if the subject is already immune, both locally and systemically? I cannot understand. And it is already some 5th year I monitoring that vaccination schedule. It's not changing. I really hope that it will be changed, and IPV will be given as the first vaccine and then OPV. And if you will search Google, it is still a lot of papers about paralytic polio caused by vaccines in India by oral vaccine, and the problem is still not solved. But still, as minimum, you have obligate vaccination against polio, and rate of disease is decreased significantly in your country as well. So, as I said, in 1988, WHO initiated a resolution for worldwide eradication of poliomyelitis. And actually, according to data on 2020's year, second type of poliovirus is already completely eradicated, and the last last case of disease registered by WHO is dated by 1999, and since that time, no official cases of polio wild type 2 are registered, and poliovirus type 3 is thought to be eradicated in 2012. So nowadays, 2 serotypes of virus are completely eradicated, and we have only 1 virus circulating, which is officially registered only in Pakistan and Afghanistan. But the major problem is Russia not included, and post-Soviet countries are not included here in that report.